So, guys, I'm going to talk about free verse contemporary poetry, which is the easiest form of poetry. I know that most people here are fiction writers and don't write poetry. And I hear it all the time. I hear people saying, like, they don't understand poetry, they don't get poetry, or poetry has too many rules, things like that. And I feel like the people in this Discord would rather write a 90,000 word novel in a month than craft a 12-line poem. That is the impression I have gotten from speaking to people about the poetry challenge, is that a poem is scary. And I'd like to change that and get everybody to write a poem and submit it. And so I'll talk about the July Poetry Challenge, which apparently we're doing now. So between the 20th and 24th of July, you can submit a poem, and it can be anywhere from like 3 lines, which is like a haiku, all the way up to 100 lines if you want to go like crazy. But most published poems are like 10 to 20 lines long, so it's really a very few words in comparison to writing a short story. And the theme for the poetry challenge is journey. You could take any aspect of a journey. You could take a physical journey or a mental journey or a spiritual journey. And that goes with our other themes, which is liminal spaces for the flash fiction and under the sea for the art. And I think that's a fun little sort of triptych of themes that work together. And just to say that I had like half hour's notice to write this, so you're not getting fancy stuff with my screenshots. I'm basically going to just read a couple of poems and say you should all write some poetry. Wait, do I have a yes. So the fun truth about writing poetry is every single fiction writer already has all the skills you need to write a poem. As a fiction writer, you know how to speak with a voice, and you know how to create an image out of words. You know rhythm and you know sound, because those things are really important in novel sentence structure too. It's why we say to read your own work out loud. And you know how to edit, and you know compression. And I speak to people who've cut 150,000 words down to 100,000 words in a novel draft, but are still daunted by the idea of writing a 10-line poem. But it's literally just compression on a different scale. So it's not a different language. It's literally using all the tools you already have as a fiction writer to just write 10 lines of poetry. Right. So I'm sorry about this first myth to Mav, but poetry does not need to rhyme. The majority of contemporary poetry does not rhyme. You don't have to make it rhyme. You don't have to struggle trying to find words that do rhyme. You can if you want to. A lot of traditional poetry does rhyme and has specific rhyming structures. But if we're talking about contemporary free verse poetry, the very vast majority of this poetry does not rhyme, and you can ignore that. The second myth that people seem to get confused by is that poetry has to be mysterious. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be about metaphor. It does not have to be about flowery language. It doesn't have to be about fancy descriptions. It doesn't have to be a riddle. Poetry can be really clear and concise. It can use very plain, direct language. And depth doesn't have to come from mystery. Depth can actually come from clarity as well. So all poetry needs is you to be willing to share something in a small amount of words. So if you think about it that way, you might find it easier to start writing a poem. And anyone who's read my poetry knows my style is basically to take a sentence or two about something that happened to me, or a random thought that I had, or something I saw in my garden, and you try and write about it in 10 or 20 lines that makes other people think about it. That's it. So it's literally just a couple of sentences in plain language with concrete facts that make people think about something. So, wait, do I have another slide? Yes. So I'll read one of my poems. I'm actually going to read three of my poems. I hate reading poems. I hate talking to people live. So this is quite new for me. But I'm going to ask everybody to write a poem and submit a poem. So I feel like it's only fair that I also take the time to read a poem. This is a poem called Celebration that I wrote in about 15 minutes when I was sitting in bed. It's a very silly poem. It's the most recent one I posted on the server. It is Celebration. There was a woman in Aldi, hair tightly packed in a bun, and she looked at my basket, saw fillet steak and a bottle of wine. Celebration, she asked, and I smiled and nodded, and I thought about elaborating on the lie and say it was my birthday, or I got a promotion, or my best friend just had a baby, or I could tell the truth and say, I'm alive, and there is a version of this world in which I'm not. It has taken me some time to realize that this is a cause for celebration. And I put the wine back. I've had enough. So that is a poem, right? You might be thinking that's not really a poem. That's just me talking about going shopping in Aldi, which is a thing that I did. And it's also a poem. It's a small contemporary commentary on the invasiveness of a stranger judging you, the awkwardness of small talk, and the inability to really sort of tell the truth to people when they ask a question. And it's a simple confession, because that's what I write. I write what's called contemporary confessional poetry. It's supposed to be a positive poem. Is a comment on the fact that it's actually really good to be alive, and sometimes it's good to celebrate that with a steak or whatever you fancy. So that is a poem. And if you think you can't write a poem, think about your last shopping trip to Walmart or wherever it is Americans go, and what happened? Something happened, and you could write about it. And that is a journey, the journey to Walmart. And this is Fuzzy Trousers. They drift back and forth, fuzzy trousers on display, and I think of each one, a tiny buzz of a whole that leaves nothing behind when consumed by my dog, who waits under a pink fuchsia bush for spicy treats. Sometimes I watch them lie in the sun, bleached against my concrete patio, and give them a teaspoon of sugar water, left with a sprinkle of nectar on my fingers. I touch it and try to remember which parts of me were lost, leaving nothing but the queen. Where do I go to gather back my bees? So that is a poem about me describing my dog eating the bees under the bush in my garden, which is something that happens to me quite often. It's also a metaphor for the feeling of having lost something, of having sort of, how to describe it, of being stripped down over time by small losses until you feel like you're less of yourself. And I wanted people to go away from that poem questioning, well, how do we gather back our bees? Like, how do we become whole? How do we practice self-care? How do we find ourselves? How do we feel full again in life? And I did that by saying, here's some bees that get eaten by my dog. So that's a poem, right? Everybody can go into their garden and look at something and write a poem about it. It doesn't need to rhyme. It doesn't need structure. It just needs to tell a small story, and hopefully make people think about something. So there you go. I've bared my soul a little bit there with some of my poetry, and sorry, I just saw the comments that Walmart is a journey like walking through a human zoo. I did not go to, I'm not finished yet. I'm aware I still have 5 minutes. I've got more stuff, don't worry. Um, I did not go to Walmart when I went to America at all, and I feel like I did miss out on that journey. So that's something for next time. Page. Right. So poetry. Right. You've got a line break. In prose, the line ends where the page ends, right? So that means nothing. The page can be different based on the size of the book. So in prose, punctuation and paragraph dictate your structure. In poetry, the line ends where you end it. And that makes a conscious choice. It makes it a unit of meaning. The end of the line is the pause, it's a breath, and it's an emphasis. And this is the one thing that writing poetry you will probably do different to prose. The last word of the line you're reading gets weight, and this can change the way the poem is spoken, or the way it's heard, or the way it's understood. And choosing to end the line in the middle of what fiction writers might call a sentence, it's called enjambment, which is a wonderful word. And I think I have an example. Right, so here's an example. My mother never learned to swim. That's a sentence. And if you change it in poetry and you said, my mother never learned to swim, the pause after learned when you're reading it is what opens up the poem to interpretation. What did my mother never learn? Did she never learn anything? Did she never learn how to live, or never learned how to be a mother? Never learned how to cook my favorite meal? Before you have the swim part, you have that flicker of something that could be a double meaning, and that is what lets people interpret things and understand what you're saying. And then, so when you're writing your poem, that's probably the one thing you're going to struggle with, is learning where to put the line breaks. And the simplest way to learn where to put the line breaks is simply to read it out loud. Break your lines where you think you want someone to think about something. But mostly just read it out aloud and see where you want the weight to be. What am I doing? The turn is the plot twist. Most poems do this, not all poetry, but it might help fiction writers to think of a poem as writing a small story, is you have a plot twist. So about 2/3 of most contemporary poetry, the poem will shift in some way. This was actually really popularized by the sonnet, so it goes all the way back to the start of poetry, but it's very common in contemporary free verse. The lens will change, the viewpoint will change, the subject matter might change. You will reframe something in a different way to the rest of the poem, and the person then hearing or reading the poem will think, oh, and they stop and they think about what you're saying, and they will interpret your poem in some way that means something to them. So in my two poems, the twists were I'm celebrating being alive with a steak. And the second one is that I'm watching bees, but I'm thinking about how to make myself whole. So those are the twists. Very, very simple reframes that can sort of reframe a poem from talking about going to Aldi to a rumination on life and death. Like it's a twist. A lot of people will read a poem and won't necessarily get your twist because every poem is not for everybody. Someone will connect with that poem, and that's who you've written it for. I don't know if this has helped anyone with simplifying the craft of writing poetry, but what else do I have? Oh yeah, how to write a poem. Just write it. That's how you write a poem. You write it. I've said this to like 4 people this morning in the Discord who were freaking out about the poetry challenge and not being able to write poetry. Is literally just write it. Write a paragraph. Write 5 or 6 sentences about your journey. Imagine that instead of me saying write a poem, I'm literally saying write a flash fiction 100-word story about a journey. And get your idea on paper. It can be a road trip, a family vacation. It can be about the journey you took from high school to college. It can be your journey of motherhood or finding yourself. It can be the journey you took during Inferno whilst you wrote 100,000 words in a month. Like, that is a journey. So you've got your paragraph, then you cut it in half. You take that paragraph and you remove every single word that's not doing work. You remove every explanation. You strip it down to the bare basics that you absolutely can that still impart your message. And then you break it into lines. Yes, Dan, there is a poetry contest. You missed slide 1. I've lost my train of thought now. You break it into lines and you read your poem out loud, and you put a line break wherever you would pause, or wherever there's a word that deserves half a second of silence after it. And at that point, congratulations, you've got a poem. Then you can look for a turn. Is there a place in the poem where you could make the reader think about something in a different way? A plot twist or a gut punch? So you're writing about being on holiday with your mum, and then at the end of it, maybe she looks really frail, or maybe she looks really wrinkled, or maybe she seems really tired after a day of being on holiday. And then it's not a poem about being on holiday with your mum, it's a poem about contemplating the mortality of your mother. It's a poem about thinking about a world in which she won't be able to go on holiday with you anymore. That's your plot twist. Sorry, everything I do turns morbid, but you can probably put a positive spin on it. So yes, just write a paragraph, trim your paragraph, and try to find a way of just conveying your message. And I'm almost done. I think I'm almost done. Here you go. Here's my slide entitled "But Why, Why," which is probably everybody's feeling right now. So poetry is the gym for the exact muscles that your fiction uses. Every hour in fiction that you spend editing and choosing between two different ways of saying something, every hour you decide, does this word work? Does this sentence work? Does this chapter work? Is my pacing okay? All of that. So that is a muscle that poetry will actually train for you. Novelists who write poetry write tighter sentences. They hear rhythm in their writing that other writers miss. And there's a reason that some people are described as writing poetic fiction. Some people are naturally very gifted at hearing the rhythm and writing poetic prose. And honestly, writing poetry is a great way to get your thoughts out there. On a personal level, it's done more for my mental health than any other tool in my life. So it's good for, I would recommend it for anybody. Some things are really small and raw and can be said really quietly in 10 lines. And some feelings are good to just talk about and to be shared. And a poem is the right size to give a small message. So yeah, for Dan and anybody else, the homework from this is that there is going to be a poetry challenge, and the subject is journey. Write a paragraph, cut it down, say it out loud, break it into lines, and then once the submission opens on the 20th of July, you do have some time, message it to me. I can't submit to the poetry challenge because I'm running it, but I wrote a poem this morning. I'm almost done. I'm 2 minutes away from done. I wrote a poem this morning on the theme of journey. So wait, where is it? There it is. And then I'll be done. It is called The Distance Between Falls. I learned to ride horses when I was 6 years old and clung to the backs of shaggy Welsh ponies without fear. And when I fell, I gave the ground a gift of bones and blood, the taste of dirt and copper, freedom. When I was 16, I won a small silver medal for the perfect round at a national tournament, and the man who watched said I would never ride again. That sort of power between my legs unmanned him, so when I fell to my knees and needed stitches later, shame. I am old now, but I still feel the quiver of warm muscle being carried and held by the power of an equal partner. The other night, I had a fever, and I dreamed of riding a grey Shire stallion through winter until I fell. My spine lay in the soft snow, still. So yeah, that's my take on Journey. Possibly not one that other people will want to emulate, but that's mine. That was literally from a weird fever dream that I had last week. And when I thought of Journey, I thought of riding horses, and then I wrote that. So, I hope that you all enjoyed this 15 minutes of my poetry. I hope that it's inspired somebody to write a poem. And I'm going to take down everybody's names and make sure you all submit into the challenge. It's mandatory now. If anybody has any comments or questions, I can answer them. Maybe.
That's very good, Eth. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Ooh, the first meaningful comment I saw was Princess and Divine Breaks. It's an amazing way to think about writing poetry and how it can be interpreted. It was very helpful. Said she's going to join. Rain asked if she'd be able to submit what she's already written recently for the contest.
Is it on the theme of journey, is what I would say. I mean, technically it's supposed to be a new piece that's not been published anywhere or shared, and the theme is journey. So anything you write into that, yeah, give that a go.
Jody said inspired her. Io again said she's inspired. Be joining. Princess said she's inspired. Serena did share a poem she wrote. Didn't pertain to theme, so I don't think she's submitting that, but she did share it. Dan said, "How do you feel about rhyming in poetry?" It's a cliche. Dan was not here when it started. The one who said it
Yes.
was driving.
Dan, you missed my entire section on rhyming. So this was mostly about contemporary free verse poetry, which does not rhyme, because I felt that that was the most approachable for anybody who hasn't written poetry. There is a lot of types of poetry that rhyme. I don't think rhyming is cliche at all. I think rhyming can be a wonderful tool. It can be quite difficult to do, and it can sort of limit the word choice. And so if you want to rhyme in your poetry, please do, and that would be wonderful to read.
Serena commented that she likes when people are willing to accept the poet don't have to rhyme. Sean said it seems much more approachable now thanks to this workshop. Treat. Mav had a question about riding Welsh ponies. Ponies in
Okay.
the U.S. are small horses. That's the same.
Yes, a pony is a small horse. A Welsh pony is actually a very specific breed of horse. We have them wild in Wales. They're very sort of I don't know if anybody knows anything about horse breeds, but they're kind of like a cob breed. So they're very stocky, very shaggy, firm horses that they tend to just chuck kids on them here at a very young age and say good luck.
Jody reiterates again that this workshop has made poetry far more approachable. Uh, says she likes free verse, sometimes rhyming.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes rhyming can make it sound forced, and that is the difficulty with rhyme. Is you see people are sort of they write one line and then they're looking at the thesaurus and trying to find a word that fits the rhyme rather than a word that fits what they want to say, and then it can sound forced. It definitely makes things more difficult, in my opinion, which is why I don't rhyme at all. So yeah.
Mav joked that she wanted to poop on his poetry. I do like a little bit of alliteration.
I love Mav's poetry, so yeah.
That's the last poetry I've written for my parts on ideas. Teresa said a lot of what we taught in school was very strict rules about poetry. I agree.
Yeah, school does have very strict rules about poetry. I hated writing poetry in high school when they forced us to, write a lot of rhyming poetry, and you'd have to do the ABBA sort of rhyming structure. In my creative writing degree, they basically said what I've just said is you don't have to. Contemporary is definitely a very accessible form of poetry for everyone.
Dan says they'll probably still stick to rhyming, but it's a certain flow going forward.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Dan. I'm looking forward to reading your poem and everybody's poem.
Serena says on the rare occasions that she does write poetry, she'd rather just tap into her feelings and let it flow.
Absolutely, that's a great way to write poetry. That's pretty much how I write poetry.
Princess says she took an advanced English courses in high school, so she was fortunate enough to not have those restrictions placed on her.
Yeah, I feel like they place more restrictions on people younger in school, and once you sort of get to college level and above, poetry is much more open minded.
Rain says she likes rhyming when there's 5 lines in a verse. It's a kind she defaults to. That is the style that I was taught in school.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's very traditional style.
took AP Lit Creative Writing and Creative Writing as independent study during her final year of college.
I noticed you didn't read out Rain's Welsh, Oliver. Is there a reason you didn't try and read that comment in Welsh? I would love to hear you say the Welsh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Diolch in far Iwan.
That's good. I liked it. It's a diolch yn fawr iawn, and I will say croesio in response to Rain. There, we'll get some Welsh out there. Thank you for, thank you for reading that. I enjoyed that. Um, do we have any questions? I don't think we have any questions. I think we can probably call this pretty soon, unless we have any.
She once had to write some poems for extra credit. She wanted to pay. She had to. Her poem was the fish is blue, the other fish is red. The fish are happy. Yay, fish.
I like that poem. And yeah. So the fish is blue, the other fish is red. The fish are happy. Yay, fish! I like it. It's perfect. Um, yeah. So thank you for all the nice comments, everyone. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mav. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Oliver, for emceeing.
No, well, I
And
tried.
at the end of the month, I want to see like 1 million entries for this poetry challenge. Every single person is submitting a poem. Um, no excuses.
Especially like your comment about just writing a paragraph, uh, a short story or whatever, and then just deleting the stuff that doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm. I think that's an easy way
or
for
add to
fiction.
a poem.
Yeah, for fiction writers, that is just, it's easier to write a paragraph and cut it down than sit there and look at the blank space and try and figure out how to say something with like 10 words. It's always easy to write a lot and then delete something. So think of it as a first draft, just get the words down and then you edit it. So yeah, I'm gonna figure out how to close this. Thank you everybody for coming. Do I just hang up? Does that, and I end it? Okay, bye guys.